Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gods and Myths of Northern Europe, Part 16. Now, since I am leaving for a week, I won't be able to make any newer videos right now. I will give you a update video, a Gods and Myths of Northern Europe video today on today Thursday. Sorry, mate. And then after I get back from Louisiana, I will be making a little video talking about it, and I'll also be making a video that I wanted to make for a long time. I made the script for it back in December, but I just want to that video is more like a just kind of like reflecting on how when I first started this channel back in 2018 till now and stuff like that, like talking about mental health, just other things I wanted to talk to you guys about. So without further ado, let's get back into reading the the Temples of Thor. The figure of the god with his hammer is said to have stood in many temples at the close of the heathen period. We hear more of the images of Thor than those of the other gods, and when he shared a temple with other deities, he is usually said to have occupied the place of honor. Rich robes are mentioned, and sacrifices of meat and bread are said to have been made to him in his temples in Norway. His worshippers would look for guidance from the image of Thor when the time came to make some difficult decision. Adam of Bremen corroborates the evidence of the sagas when he tells us in the 11th century that Thor's image stood in the heathen temple at Uppsala, and that the god held a scepter, his hammer, maybe, in his hand. In the 11th century Irish poem, we find a Christian saint demanding of the king of Dublin that he should take the golden castle from the hands of the Black Devil. Marstrander interprets this as a reference to a black image of Thor in his rich shrine in the Viking stronghold in Dublin. It is known that the king Mile Sichlion did in fact take the ring of Thor and many other treasures from his shrine in 994. Accounts in Heimskringla and Fleitjarbuk of the destruction of such statues of Thor by the Christian kings of Norway imply that they were man-sized or even larger. A description of an image of Thor at Thrandheim refers to a chariot drawn by goats in which Thor sat. Thor sat in the middle. He was the most highly honored. He was huge and all adorned with gold and silver. Thor was arranged to sit in a chariot. He was very splendid. There were goats, 2 of them, harnessed in front of him, very well wrought. Both car and goats ran on wheels. The rope round the horns of the goats was of twisted silver, and the whole was worked with extremely fine craftsmanship. Skeggi, the man who took Olaf Tryggvason to the temple to see Thor, persuaded him to pull the cord around the horns of the goats, and when he did so, the goats moved easily along. Thereupon, Skeggi declared that the king had done service to the god, and Olaf not surprisingly became angry, and called on his men to destroy the idols, while he himself knocked Thor from his chariot. The implication here is that the pulling along of a well-greased chariot formed part of a ritual in Thor's honor. The noise of the chariot of Thor rattling along was said to cause thunder. Snorri derives the god's name. I don't know Old Norse. I'm trying to learn Old Norse, so please forgive me. Akker på, from the verb akka, to drive, and interprets it as Thor the driver or charioteer. This is in accordance with the picture of a chariot driven by the god across the sky, which in many religious forms part of the conception of the sun god. Such a picture of the thunder god may well be an ancient one in the north. Lappish loanwords from thunder, atsereit, and others appear to have been derived from an earlier form of Old Norse, reed, which has the double meaning of a wheeled vehicle and thunder. Descriptions of Thor's arrival in the 9th century Skaldic verse emphasize the clatter and roar of a storm, and show that this aspect of the god was by no means forgotten in Iceland. We find, for example, in the 9th century poem, Heißlong, the son of earth drove to the iron game, and the way of the moon resounded before him. The only places of the powers burned before the kinsman of Ul. Earth ground of the deep was beaten with hail as the goats drew the wagon god for his meeting with Hungnir. The rocks shook and the boulders were shattered. High heaven burned. It was not merely Thor's power over the thunder which was symbolized within the temple. We hear also in many passages in the sagas of a great gold or silver ring on which oaths were sworn, and which was kept in temples where Thor was worshipped. There is independent evidence that this ring was sacred to Thor, for in Irish sources the Ring of Thor is one of the treasures taken from his temple in 994. Earlier than this, in 876, the heathen Danish leaders in England made a truce with King Alfred, and they are said in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle to have sworn oaths to him under a sacred ring. Descriptions of this ring suggest that it was an arm ring and not a finger ring. Indeed, in Eyrbyggja saga, Snorri the priest is said to have worn it on his arm, where it protected him from the blow from a sword. In Hjoksbok, in a passage repeated in several of the sagas, it is said to have weighed 2 ounces in silver, which would make it not much larger than a wedding ring. The statement in Eyrbyggja saga, settling the weight at 20 ounces, seems more likely to be reliable. The oath formula given in the sagas mentions Frey and Njord and the Almighty God, usually assumed to be Thor, because of his association with the oath ring. It may also be noted that the General Assembly of Iceland opened on Thor's Day, while Adam of Bremen alludes to the breaking up of Thor's image, which stood in the place of the Assembly of Uppsala about AD 1030. It would seem that Thor had taken over some of the powers of Tyrs, and in particular that which hallowed oaths taken between men. One of Thor's most enthusiastic worshippers described in the sagas was Thorolf Mosterskeg, bearded man of Most, whose arrival in Iceland is recorded in Landna Mabok and told in the early chapters of Eyrbyggja saga at some length. He came from the little island of Most on the west coast of Norway, and when life grew difficult on account of the tyranny of Harald Fairhair, he consulted Thor as to whether he should leave for Iceland. The reply was evidently favorable, for he took down a Thor shrine, packed it high seat pillars, and most of the timber from it on his ship, and also the earth from under the pedestal where Thor had sat. When he reached Iceland, he flung the high seat pillars overboard and lay on the point where they were washed ashore. There he marked out the plot of land where he would live, and where he meant to rebuild Thor's temple. He went round the borders of the new state with fire, and then began building his own house and a mighty sanctuary for his divine friend. The temple is described in detail in the 4th chapter of Eyrbyggja saga. It had pillars with god nails in them, the holy ring, a sacrificial bowl in which blood was caught when animals were sacrificed to the god, and images of Thor and other deities. Here, as well as the bowl of blood in the ring, we have emphasis on the importance of the high seat pillars. In Scandinavian halls, these were the carved wooden pillars flanking the seat of honor, and we see from this and other passages that they also stood in Thor's temple. Thor, as became a god with special dominion over the realm of the sky and over storms, had special power over sea journeys. His worshippers prayed for fair weather and favorable winds, but they did more. Many of those whose arrivals in Iceland are chronicled in Landna Mabok acted like Thorolf. As they neared the shores of the island, they flung the high seat pillars overboard, so that the god himself might guide them to land. It seems likely that a figure of Thor himself was sometimes carved on these pillars, for there is one specific reference in the sagas to a seat, presumably the high seat, with Thor carved upon it. Of the connection between the thunder god and the great trees of the forest, more would be said below. For the moment we may note the reference to god nails in the pillar of Thor's temple. A possible clue to the significance of such nails is found in 17th century accounts of heathen religion among the Lapps. The Sami. This refers to them as their not good name, but yeah. They are said to have kept an image of the thunder god in the form of a rude block of wood, with a man's beard carved at the top, and two sticks for arms, one holding a mallet. Schleifer says, into his head they drive a nail of iron or steel, and a small piece of flint to strike with fire with, if he hath a mind to it. If the nails in the pillar were indeed used for the ritual kindling of fire, we might see an explanation of the strange myth about the duel between Thor and Hrungnir the giant, told by Snorri. The giant was armed with a whetstone and a stone shield. When Thor appeared with thunder and lightning, he hurled his hammer at Hrungnir, while the giant hurled the whetstone at him. The whetstone was smashed to pieces, and one small piece remained in Thor's head. It is said to be there still. Such a fantastic incident must either be based on obscure poetic imagery or on ritual practice. One suggestion made by Doomsdale is that the double duel between the giant and Thor and their two supporters, Mistcalf and Thialfi, preserves memories of initiation ritual, a mock demon being set up for the youth to vanquish, while the myth of the god's combat was taught to him as the inner meaning of the ceremony. The strange fact of the whetstone being left in Thor's head might be explained by the Sami practice of using the head of the thunder god as a source of fire. The whetstone of the giant, encountering the iron hammer of the god, would be equivalent to the kindling of fire with flint and steel. This in turn represented the flash of the lightning. Association of fire with Thor's temple is made in a late saga, Kjolnisingja saga. Here the temple is described in the usual way, but it is also said that the altar was made of iron on top. This was the place for the fire which was never allowed to go out. This they called the sacred fire. This has been usually rejected as an invention of the saga teller, perhaps imitated by a classical source. It is probable, however, that the association between Thor and fire was a genuine one. It was with fire that Thorolf went around his land, claiming it in the name of the god, and there is some reason to believe that the fires of cremation might be connected with Thor as well as with Odin. There is evidence that a perpetual fire burned in the temple of the thunder god of the old Prussians, within an oak tree sanctuary. Thor's power over the lightning, the fire from heaven, must not be forgotten, and this aspect of the god was, as well as we see, further emphasized by the imitation of thunder within the temple itself. Okay. So that was longer than I expected, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will try to be posting my Skyrim videos before I leave tomorrow, but I won't be doing another Along the Edge video until late Saturday or early Sunday when I get back. So if you want to see more of what I do, follow my social media, which will be in the description. If you want to watch more of my pagan-related videos, I have a playlist full of a lot of videos that I've done and stuff. And if you want to see more of what I do, subscribe, like, comment, share, or whatever else, and I'll see you in the next video.